Hello learners, I am Dr. Sunita Dhal and today I will be talking about Gandhi and women's empowerment, basic understanding of its interlinkages for the course MGP 003, and this particular lecture is meant for the Unit 9, that is Gandhi's views on women. In this lecture, we are going to understand if there will be a Gandhian framework, then how it has helped us to understand women's situation during that time, as well as and how it can be useful for women's empowerment if we locate the same Gandhian principles in the present context. And with this, I would welcome all of you for the lecture on Gandhi and women's empowerment, basic understanding of its interlinkages. The learning outcomes. After watching this video, you will be able to reflect upon Gandhi's views on women, understand the concept of interlinkages between Gandhian framework and women's empowerment, and comprehend women's participation in the freedom movement. Gandhi recognized the subordinated position of women, which has largely shaped through several social practices. Various social practices have conditioned and socialized women's thought process accordingly. Gandhi also has recognized the importance of gender-based division of labor in certain areas of social lives, since women and men have difference in nature of work, hence the vocations of the two must also be different. In this way, Gandhi has actually, looked at the gender division of labor that was existed in the society during that time, and for which, he had an opinion that women and men have difference in nature of work, hence vocation or their occupation must be different. Gandhi emphasized the role of women in the reproductive sphere with regard to their contribution in care work and household labor. He made an important interconnection between women, ahimsa and satyagraha. To Gandhi, and I quote, "Women is the true incarnation of ahimsa." To him, the realities of life are to be shaped by the practice of ahimsa. Therefore, women and men are placed in complementarity with a combination of morality and sacrifice. So, how to maintain the social equilibrium. It is how we, women and men, they play a complementary role in terms of maintaining the equilibrium right from family to society and community. He recognized that women can emerge as leaders of the society because of their high moral values and sense of sacrifice, which could be guided by the principles of ahimsa and satyagraha. According to Gandhi, women is the emblem of ahimsa, non-violence. And I quote, "Weak in striking, strong in suffering, she had come to occupy a pivotal position in his plan of satyagraha." And this has been taken from the Unit 9 your self-learning material. He wanted to convert the nature of self-sacrifice and suffering of women into their Shakti power. He has always advocated freedom for women and women's equal status in the society and their equal participation in the freedom struggle of the nation. To quote him, "I passionately desire the utmost freedom for our women. I detest child marriages. I deplore the criminal indifference of parents who keep their daughters utterly ignorant and illiterate and bring them up only for the purpose of marrying them off to some young man of means." And I unquote. On the idea of marriage, he emphasized on the aspect of spiritual bonding between the husband and wife, in which wife remains a companion of her husband and share equal partnership in joy and sorrow. Gandhi was against the practice of child marriage. Not only he was against the practice of child marriage, but dowry, caste system, widowhood, so on and so forth. To him, this was a sin and a breach of trust on the part of the parent. He questioned, what is Kanyadan in case of a little children? Father can be the protector of his children and not their owner. So in that sense, child marriage, we can say that it is a violation of human rights during that time, and which Gandhi opposed as a practice. He advised the youth to break the caste order to be able to abolish the system of child marriage. He tried to eradicate social ills with social intervention only. He was against the practice of dowry system, and it is linked to the practice of caste system in India. He emphasized the role of education to break not only the caste system but the practice of dowry. Since he made interlinkages between the practice of dowry and the ordering of the caste system in India, and he thought probably by educating the youth and creating a kind of a public opinion with regard to the ordering of the caste system and the practices of dowry, we can break the hierarchy that existed in the society, and still it exists. The new societal values can be formed among the youth when they are educated and create a strong personality as change agents. Well, how do we see women and Satyagraha and their role in Satyagraha? According to Gandhi, Satyagraha means vindication of truth. The means are the ends. Therefore, the means we choose indicate the nature of ends we get. He wrote, if you use violent, coercive, unjust means, whatever ends you produce will necessarily embed that injustice. It was cited by Ruchira Gupta in her article in 2019. In this context, he envisioned the inclusion of women and other marginalized communities as means in political activities with dignity. How women and other marginalized communities can be participated in the freedom struggle with dignity. He thought when we include women as means in the political struggle or in the freedom struggle of the nation state, then the end will also be a just end. Under the reform movements in India, certain social customs such as child marriage, parda, sati, temple prostitution, rehabilitation of children in brothels, discrimination against widow, and lack of educational access to women were challenged by upper class and educated women. As cited by Gupta in her article in 2019, Gandhi writes that the women leading reform movements educated him on various issues, from child marriage to female illiteracy to the parda, which enabled him to learn about the strategies of passive resistance and non-violence from women. So Gandhi used, or within the Gandhian framework, we can see that strategy of passive resistance or the non-violence was seen as the strength of women, and now this strategy one can use for women's empowerment. By realizing this, he thought women would be his reliable allies in the struggle against the colonial power. Gandhi began to learn the method of passive resistance from the women in his life, his mother in particular, and his wife, to make the Indian freedom movement as a mass struggle. He not only adopted the cause of the women's movement, child marriage, parda, female illiteracy, but began to weave its non-violent methods into the fabric of Indian Satyagraha. Gandhi also realized the difficulties for women to participate in nationalist struggle due to various socio-cultural barriers, and I know you must be aware of the different socio-cultural barriers that women face even in today. So one can always visualize what women must be facing in the past years during the freedom struggle. He travelled across rural India and tried to understand what could enable women to participate in public sphere. He began to select activities for villages where women can participate and get the benefit, and thereby they can participate in the freedom movement. With concrete ways to participate. Thousands and millions of women, educated and illiterate, homemakers and widows, students and the elderly, organized public meetings, sold khadi, prescribed literature, started picketing shops of liquor and foreign goods, prepared contraband salt, and came forward to face all sorts of atrocities, including inhuman treatment by the police and the imprisonment. They came forward to give all that they had, their wealth and strength, their jewelry and belongings, their skills and labor, all in sacrifice for this unusual and unprecedented struggle. Gandhi held high ideals for the institution of marriage. However, he urged women for their self-development within this institution. To quote Norville, the wife, Gandhi asserts, is not a slave of her husband, but a comrade, his better half, colleague, and friend. She is co-sharer with him of equal rights and duties. He also questioned the practice of early marriage, which created barriers for women in their physical, intellectual, and spiritual development. Therefore, he had an opinion that within the institution of marriage, the self-development for women is important. And how do we see women's development when they come forward and participate in the public sphere through various activities. Gandhi declared in the February 1925 in the edition of Young India, to call women the weaker sex is a libel. If by strength is meant moral power, then women is immeasurably man's superior. Has she not greater intuition? Is she not more self-sacrificing? Has she not greater courage? Without her, man could not be. If non-violence is the law of our being, then the future is with women. However, not all women were ready to adopt the method of non-violence in their struggle for emancipation. Gandhi declared in the February 1925 edition of Young India, and I quote, "To call women the weaker sex is a libel. If by strength is meant moral power, then women is immeasurably man's superior. Has she not greater intuition? Is she not more self-sacrificing? Has she not greater courage? Without her, man could not be. If non-violence is the law of our being, then the future is with women." Cited in Norville 1997. However, not all women were ready to adopt the method of non-violence in their struggle for emancipation or empowerment. S.R. Bakshi, in Gandhi and Status of Women, writes that Gandhi wished to awaken the consciousness of women about their existential condition or reality and encourage them to fight against the Raj by joining the Indian National Congress. In the freedom movement, women across rural India and some women from Muslim and Parsi communities also joined Gandhi in his struggle for freedom. In the fight for women's emancipation, many eminent women leaders like Sarojini Naidu joined Gandhi and worked extensively and tirelessly for political and social reforms in India. She fought hard against the old age practice of parda and child marriage. Not only Indian women, but women like Anne Besant, who met Gandhi in London in the year 1887, also joined the fight for women's political and social rights in India. And now let us look at Gandhi and women's empowerment. What are the key points that we can take it forward when we contextualize Gandhian framework in the present context? With regard to women's empowerment, scholars have argued that Gandhi has adopted a specific methodology for empowering women in public life. For example, and I quote, "To empower women, Gandhi changed the notions of power robbing of its aggressiveness and masculinity and giving it a feminine character, and it was recited by Kumar in the year 2013. Gandhi facilitated women to participate in the national movement as he made common usable items made available to women in which women also participated in its making. These items become the symbols of nationalist struggle. Wearing khadi clothes and using handmade salts were the symbols of freedom struggle, and many women supported salt satyagraha by using indigenous salt in the kitchen. So this is how the strategy of resistance Gandhi has argued for, that how in this Gandhi symbolizes that different items such as different practices, adopting different practices such as wearing khadi or using handmade salt would be act as a symbol where women can associate them, by which they can indirectly or directly participate in the nationalist movement. Kumar writes in an article, during this movement, women went beyond the confines of their homes, and women all over India made and sold salt in street corners and public places. In this sense, empowerment can be described as independent decision making in a specific manner, and which is very particular to women's decision making, even if they make the decision within the home as well as they translate the decision making in the public sphere. Kumar further argues that Gandhi reformulated the patriarchal ideology within the liberal reformist framework. And I quote, he never questioned the existence of family structures, but on the contrary emphasized the role of women as equal partners and emphasized the role of women as Sahabhaginis. Gandhi evolved definite strategy of a graded involvement of women in the nationalist movement. The Gandhian strategy did encourage women's public participation, however, failed to bring about revolutionary changes in the position of women with regard to their roles in private sphere. Gandhi evolved a strategy of graded involvement of women in the nationalist struggle. Initially, women played a limited role in the movement. However, at the time of freedom struggle, when he propagated use of khadi, boycott of foreign cloth and other such kind of constructive programs, one could see women who were living in seclusion or in isolation could identify with the cause of freedom struggle. During civil disobedience movement, women had a limited role and initially was not participated in the Dandi March. However, in the Quit India movement of 1942, Gandhi wanted women to take leadership roles. And I quote, in 1939, he wrote in the Harijan, I would love to find that my future army contained a vast preponderance of women over men. It was cited by Kumar in the year 2013. Gandhi's methodology of women's empowerment emphasized on women's participation in public activities. This framework had also inherent challenges or limitations. Kumar argues that limitations can be seen in two folds, such as limited conceptualization of womanhood, like how the construction of womanhood was conceptualized in relation to the private sphere, and there was a limited sense of action plan for future. And with this, I would like to end this lecture, and which will give a basic understanding on Gandhi's views on women and how Gandhian principles can be seen as a framework for women's empowerment in the present context. And this entire lecture has been drawn from the self-learning material as well as the references which were given in this in the list, 3 references. So major argument for this lecture has been drawn from Kumar, Gupta and Norwell in their articles. With this, I thank you all. of you.